From the introduction, my name is Michał. I'm the CEO and founder of Elympics. I'll tell us something more about the project later, but now, just as an introduction to the topic of Web3 games and play-to-earn model here. But first of all, welcome to Digital Dragons. It's great to be here, really, after 2 years online, I believe, or yeah. I'm sure the previous one was hosted online, and it's great to be here as in person, in the flesh. I'm going to start by telling a story of a really oversimplified history of game monetization models. Again, this is really oversimplified, but it shows a point. So, of course, first, as we started, as video games really started, the industry started. We've started with the pay-to-play model. So the games this is now called premium, where you purchase a game upfront, pay for it, and then you you basically get all the content, and you can have fun with it. And later with new technologies came new business models. So again, free-to-play, which started right around the time when mobile games started to get popular, and it was really enabled by the technology of being able to create in-app purchases, show video ads, show ads really in games. And yeah, so this new business model that came to life around the time where I joined the market as a game developer. It was enabled by the technology, and of course, at first the model was kind of hated upon by the industry, believing that only the premium model is an acceptable model for video games, for entertainment. However, over the years, it found its place on the market, and we see many free-to-play titles being released nowadays. And now, with again, new technology unlocking new possibilities of monetization, which is the play-to-earn model, which we'll of course focus on in this presentation. The technology making it possible, of course, is the blockchain, are the NFTs and cryptocurrencies. So within these two markets, these two industries of, first of all, gaming, of course, and second of all, crypto. In this intersection lies the group of play-to-earn games that we're gonna explore. But first, let's start with the question, and it's not gonna be, the question is, why are you here? It's not really meant to be so philosophical, but really in the industry. I just wanted to know about the audience, and because especially in play-to-earn, both in the player base and in creators, we're seeing people coming from crypto and people coming from gaming. So how would you consider yourself? Who considers themselves to be gaming native? Okay, a few people, around half, and crypto natives? Okay, and others are just here to listen, I guess. Good. Anyway, so this presentation is mostly for those gaming natives, and I hope I'll be able to explain why the market is moving towards this direction and why I believe it will keep moving that way. But first, we need another philosophical question of why do we even play games? When we look at a game as a utility, it's really a way for us to have fun. It's entertainment at the most basic level. So we put in our time and we play the game to have fun, and that's first thing that comes to mind. But actually, that's not the only thing that we're getting when playing a game, because we also get gratification from the game. When I'm doing good, the game gratifies me, tells me, "Wow, what an amazing score," and this contributes to me wanting to play more. And of course, excellence, which is the craving of humans to become good at something. So when I practice and I get better and better, I can beat other players and achieve better scores. And that's something that can be a goal within itself for some players. And our time is not the only thing that we put in, because we also put in our skills to become excellent. And we also, in some cases more than others, put in money or put in the time to view advertisements in free-to-play. Money in pay-to-play, and money, of course, in free-to-play as well. And really what play-to-earn is it's changing this chart, and it's telling players that you can also make money by playing this game. And how do we make this? Of course, it utilizes this sort of new technology, which is blockchain, which are smart contracts, cryptocurrencies, and so on. I'll try to explain a little bit later. But at the most basic level, play to earn is a way for players, a game where players can generate income, real income, financial income by playing the game, and where, welcome, and where players can be in-game assets, in-game items that we buy. In free-to-play, we buy with in-app purchases, for example, and here we buy using cryptocurrency, and those assets get stored on a crypto wallet. That again, the most basic definition of play to earn. And moving to examples, who's heard of the game called Axie Infinity? One person, two people, okay. It's a very big game of 2021, I believe, and now it still holds its ground. Basically what it is, it's a crypto game, the biggest crypto game right now, I believe, where you buy NFTs, those Axies, sort of inspired by Pokemon, where you buy Axies and you duel using Axies. You have to own 3 Axies to engage in a duel, and you earn cryptocurrency by playing with those Axies. So you can buy, you can breed them, generating new Axies, you can collect them, and you earn cryptocurrency by playing either against other players or by breeding them and selling them again on the market. And sort of the big flash news that hit the press last year was its $3 billion valuation for its latest funding, with millions of players online. Actually, it contributes greatly to economy on the Philippines, for example, where many players do this. Many people play Axie Infinity as their full-time job because they can earn money for renting Axies from people from the West as sort of their scholarship programs, and splitting that revenue between those who rent and those who borrow. And that's their full-time job of playing Axie Infinity, and it's very popular on the Philippines. It was also a subject, unfortunately, of a recent hack that was hacked on the bridge to their chain, which is, of course, when you have a game that generates lots of revenue and people will try to exploit. Just proves my point that people will try to exploit your code. But of course, that's not the only game. And there are, and there are many more being produced, like, for example, this one. This one is called Snook, and it claims to be the first skill-based game. It's an IO-style game where you play as a snake, really, and basically you can earn cryptocurrency as well by playing online against other players. There is also this game called Crypto Raiders. I'm not connected in any way to any of those games. Those are the ones that I happen to know about or heard about in Deconstructor of Fun being analyzed. So this one is a crypto dungeon crawler where you also purchase characters as NFTs, and you can crawl dungeons earning cryptocurrency and create more, resell those items that you loot in a dungeon, equip items to your characters, and so on. The difference between those games and classical, I would say, free-to-play games is that all those assets are, in fact, NFTs that you can store on your crypto wallet and you can later resell. And of course, there is the game created by my studio, which we're currently working on. It will be called Orbs Kingdom. This is the technology demo where you can play duel against other players on the Polygon chain. But when you look at all of those games, really most of them nowadays, most of those games have one thing in common, that the gameplay sometimes seems really, really shallow compared to free-to-play titles, because for most of them, the gameplay is just the tip of the iceberg, and the real complexity lies below, lies in the tokenomics, lies in the smart contracts that are deployed, and the gameplay is just a cherry on top, I would say, and it doesn't have to be this way. So, okay, but to understand, we need to, again, switch gears and go to the basics. And I'll try to do a brief explanation to those who don't know anything about blockchain, or just to set the ground for topics I'll touch on later. So, brief explanation of the blockchain. I hope everyone has heard of Bitcoin, and that was the first, I believe, app that utilized blockchain in a meaningful way. Briefly introducing blockchain, it's really a fairly simple concept of, as the name suggests, chain of blocks that are mined by people, and a block is just a piece of data that has a hash, and that's cryptographically secured by miners, so that it cannot be changed later. So as it's a chain, there are many nodes on many blocks on the blockchain, and each consecutive node depends on the previous node's hash. And in this way, it's really computationally expensive to change anything on the blockchain, and that's why it's considered immutable and secure. And that's basically it. So a distributed database that cannot be changed and is write-only. When you can change values, and it's distributed, meaning that you have nodes on the internet that connect to one another. It's not stored in any specific place. It's stored on all the nodes that come to a consensus of what the next block is going to be, and that's the new blockchain. And that's it when it comes to things like Bitcoin, for example. And there is this other thing, which you might have heard about. It's called Ethereum. And Ethereum really popularized the idea of smart contracts, which is the term coined in the 1990s, actually. And the basic idea behind smart contracts is that those are just like regular contracts that are written on a piece of paper with a lawyer, and you can write a contract for something. And the only difference is that those smart contracts are not executed by the parties, but they're executed by code that is stored on the blockchain, on the Ethereum blockchain, for example. The contracts themselves are also stored there, so there's no middleman to execute those contracts. Their security is based on mathematics. So it's best explained, I guess, on an example. Let's take an example of you're trying to fund your next game, and you run a Kickstarter campaign. So you start a Kickstarter campaign. People can view your demo and pay money to Kickstarter, and then they have to trust that once your game gets funded, Kickstarter will transfer that money to your account, and then they have to trust that if your game doesn't get funded, Kickstarter will transfer the money back to the people. And there comes this recurring idea of trust that is inherent to contracts, because if Kickstarter doesn't transfer the money, then of course you can sue them and you have to go to jurisdiction, you have to get a lawyer and so on. However, with smart contracts, you can write a smart contract for funding, and that's actually one of the many use cases of smart contracts. You can write that contract, and you can see clearly in code what will be executed. There's no one executing it because it's distributed, decentralized, and blockchain itself is executing the conditions in the smart contracts, which comes, of course, with its own set of challenges, like the fact that it's immutable. Once you deploy a smart contract, you cannot really change it, to some extent at least. So the main features, I would say, of the blockchain and of smart contracts. First of all, of course, they're decentralized, which means no one really controls it. There's no central source. Node operators run the software, and the more you can join as a node operator mining cryptocurrency, of course. However, it's decentralized, meaning that it's stored on all of the node operators. And it really brings us this bankless narrative that we can interact more with one another instead of using the middleman. The second feature is flexibility and transparency, and it derives from the fact that everything on the blockchain is public, and that means that everybody is playing by the same rules. So you can see those contracts, you can evaluate them, and you can decide whether you want to engage with them or not. And there is no special information on the blockchain that's not accessible to everyone. Everyone can view the whole state of the blockchain. And that also means that, blockchain is pseudo-anonymous, meaning you can create all sorts of accounts, but every action that you take on the blockchain is public. Security and immutability. Again, blockchain is immutable, and it comes from cryptography, and I won't get into that. It cannot be tampered of or changed. Any attacks on the blockchain would be considerably more expensive, computationally expensive, than attacks on centralized networks. Because when you have a computer with your data or your database and you have a single backup and both of those go down, then you're out of luck. And with the blockchain, when several nodes go down and on the network, it doesn't really matter. As long as there is at least one node running, the blockchain should still be somewhat functional. So hacking it once there are many nodes is nearly impossible. And all you have to do to access your data, access your funds that are on the blockchain or your NFTs or anything is having your private key, which is basically like your password. Another feature, a really important one, is that it removes conflicts of interest. It sort of applies to the crowdfunding example I gave earlier. And another example would be an insurance provider. If you pay an insurance provider some money per month for insurance, for medical insurance, and if you get hit by a bus, you signed an agreement that they will pay for your medical bills, for example, or for your treatment, and so on. However, they're incentivized not to do so, and they will try to find loopholes. However, with the case of smart contracts on the blockchain, then there is no decision for them to make. There is just code that gets executed once some conditions are met. Of course, this brings us to another problem, which is a really complex one, which is the Oracle problem, which is how do you even get the information that someone got hit by a bus on the blockchain so that smart contracts can be executed, but that's a topic, I guess, for another time. And of course, trustlessness. So blockchain is trustless. When you, for example, when you get some service from some provider and you're not satisfied, then you can walk out the door. Nowadays, you can walk out the door and go to another brand that is going to make the exact same promises, like for example with internet providers, and you have to make those decisions based on the brands, mostly at least. And if you're somewhat skilled in code, you can read the smart contracts and see what are the conditions there, and you don't have to trust the other party that they will, for example, transfer the funds. Okay, so brief explanation on the blockchain, I guess it's done. And now, how does this apply to games? Well, looking back at the at the history and trends in game monetization models. Let's take a look. Let's take a look again, because blockchain as a tool is utilized, of course, in the play-to-earn model. And what does that mean? We can have, when designing a game, let's look at from a design perspective. What is our main focus when creating a pay-to-play game? For me as a developer, my main goal would be to make my game really marketable. So, of course, I can sell as many copies as possible. Of course, I'm incentivized also by reviews, somewhat by retention of players, but really, my main monetary goal is to sell as many copies as possible. When we move to the free-to-play model, then I start to care more about retention, because players are not monetized the instant they download or purchase the game. Instead, they're monetized a little bit later, either watching ads or making in-app purchases. And of course, that requires retention, and that requires players to be retained in the game, so to come back on day 1, day 7, day 30. And of course, that requires us as developers to create those in-game stores, for example, like this one, where you optimize the things that you offer players so that they buy more and more again and again. And this brings us to live ops and, for example, selling swords for a dungeon crawler. And then the next week you sell another sword, which is a little bit better than the previous one, so that you drive yourselves and make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, utilizing blockchain, utilizing this technology, these ideas of play to earn, we can switch our focus from designing a store, in-game store, and make those items sort of come from players, so players can create them, craft them, and then resell them. Because you can, using NFTs, using smart contracts, for example, you can program into your items the ideas like, for example, revenue from every transaction that players make on, for example, on a sword. So when you put a sword on the market, a player buys it, and you get commission for every consecutive purchase that players make on the marketplace. So instead of focusing on optimizing your store, your in-app store, and optimizing your sales during live ops every week or every month, instead you can focus on long-term retention, which will be your main goal as a developer, because you want to drive those, again, resellability of items from which you get royalties, and utility of items so that they retain value over time. And of course, the main component of every play-to-earn game is its community, which you of course need an engaged community that believes in your game, that is willing to purchase your items even at an early stage, and then later utilizing those items, earn money for them, of course, and resell those items, craft new items, and resell those items on the market. And again, that's something you don't have to build yourself, because the same way that in-app purchases brought the necessary technology for free-to-play, in the same way marketplaces and NFTs can bring resell royalties for you as a developer, where you don't have to code anything new, and you can just use this as a tool to create your game. And looking at those games, those play-to-earn games, from the perspective, we'll look at them from the perspective of players and from the perspective of developers. The first most important for me is that when I play a crypto game, I can resell those items. So even if a game has an in-app store, like for example this one, when I look at a store like that in a free-to-play game, I view that as money spent, not as an investment. Because once I get bored with this particular game, I don't want to play it anymore. well, that money is lost and I cannot resell it to anyone. And in play to earn, when I purchase an item, a sword or something, and I use it for some time, and then I decide I don't want it anymore, I don't want to play, I don't like this sword, I want to resell it, well, it's possible, and it's really what a developer wants as well. So they want you to buy their items, of course, and later resell them after you don't want them, don't need them anymore. So as a player, I'm more incentivized to buy, and I'm more willing to buy because I know I view this as not as money spent, but as a monetary investment, which will maybe rise in price, maybe drop in price. It doesn't really matter, but I can get some of my money back for this item. I can resell it on the market. The second one is reselling the game itself after completing it. Of course, this comes to whether the game that we're talking about actually does have a definite end, but we could come back to the times where you purchased games, completed them, and then you could resell them on the market to some other player that wants to play them or exchange them. And that's also possible using NFTs or tokens. There are businesses that come to life that want to implement this idea. And that's really coming back to being able to resell the game after I complete it. And again, that makes me want to spend more on a game because I don't view this as money spent and lost, sort of lost, but as some investment for my time, and then having fun, of course, while playing the game. And then after playing the game, I can resell it and get some of my money back, well, depending on, of course, whether the game price goes up or down. I can even earn some money for it. Of course, the third incentive of playing games that are, again, comparing a free-to-play game and play-to-earn game of the same quality, then of course I'm incentivized to play because I will simply make money doing it. And it sort of comes to this idea like in sports, in professional sports or esports, some people like to play football, and some people like to watch football on TV and watching the football stars earning money doing so. And this comes to the same idea. I can play games and make money while doing it. And of course, those sort of less important topics, but again, as a player, the emotions I get when playing a crypto game. Who here has played any crypto game before? Some people. Those emotions that I got, at least, when playing some of those crypto games were very similar to those emotions that I get when creating a game and live opsing a game. And it is looking at charts, looking at the value of particular items, because when you're comparing dollars spent for quality time, those games are not currently competing for entertainment time. They're really playing on different emotions. So investing in a game and also feeling partly like a game developer, the thrill of risking some items that you, for example, stake on the blockchain and stake to play a particular game, sort of like a game that you would play with that would be a constant permadeath whenever you lose, for example. And of course, hardcore gaming, when you have games like that game I showed, Crypto Raiders, you really have to dig into the stats of particular characters and particular items and evaluate what's the best loot that you can get, what's the best equipment that you can equip to your character. And that comes to waking up those hardcore gamers inside of us. And from the developer's perspective, of course, we get to focus on long-term retention instead of store monetization, because that's going to be the main thing that drives our revenue in the long term, which of course makes us design games that are more engaging to players. Of course, royalties, I touched on those before, from resale value of NFTs. Of course, you can get funds early, you can mint NFTs early, and get players engaged in a game. Those that want to invest early, those that want to feel like developers, you can utilize that idea and get funding in a different way publicly. And of course, you get to focus on the gameplay and on a perceived value of the game, which is the willingness of players to invest long term in a game and to stake their tokens. And you get players that are really willing to contribute into the development process. Because when you look at most of those games, as I said, in mobile market, you would consider them to be, you would consider some of them to be a prototype, really, or an late prototype, not worth soft launching yet, for example. But players in the crypto space are far more accepting. And as I've said before, the gameplay is just the tip of the iceberg, and there is much more done below on the smart contract side. Okay, so having said why, let's now move on to how. And we'll create a very basic blockchain game for those of you to, it's not something you would deploy definitely, but we'll do it anyway. Using Solidity. This is the language that you write smart contracts in on the Ethereum blockchain, at least. And yeah, that's going to be a really simple on-chain game that is going to be totally executed on the blockchain with the rock, paper, scissors mechanics. And the basic way it works is that player will enter, choosing their move. So they'll choose either rock, paper, or scissors, and they will pay a submission fee, which is going to be 100th of ETH. And then their move will be stored on the blockchain, and then the other player will enter with their move, and then we settle, also paying the submission fee, and then we settle the match, paying the total submission fee to the winner. So the interface is going to look like this. I rock, paper, scissors. We have one function. That's Solidity. That's how Solidity looks like. We have one function, which is called play. The only parameter here is game move, which is just an enum of either rock, paper, or scissors. This function is external, meaning it can be called from other smart contracts or by users directly. And it's marked as payable, which means you can transfer, or you have to, in this case, transfer ETH in order to call it. And that's the implementation, and please do not copy it because it has some fatal security flaws, and it's designed that way so that it has them. But again, we'll do this anyway just to show you how this works. Our main function is implemented here, function play. First of all, we require that message.value, so the value sent with this transaction is exactly equal to 10 to the power 16, which means 0.01 ETH, because it's in Wei, and 1 ETH is 10 to the 18th Wei. And if it's not that, then we call an exception, entry fee invalid, please pay 100 of ETH. Then we append this entry to the entries array, and if once the entries array gets the length of 2, we settle the match. So we get the winner, and we transfer twice entry fee to the winner. If the entries are the same, so both players put, for example, rock, then it's a draw, and we transfer entry fee to player 0 and player 1. And that's it, really, to create sort of, well, we wouldn't call it a game, but yeah, you can play it. It has one fatal security flaw, which derives from the points I made earlier, that all information on the blockchain is public. So whenever the first player enters, the second player can just read the information of what I put there on the blockchain and choose my move accordingly to win some money. So you wouldn't implement it, of course, this way. You use some sort of cryptography. So for example, the user encrypts their move and then signs it, so that's not possible to tamper with it, for example. However, or you could perfectly implement games like turn-based games that when moves are public. So for example, chess or checkers, you could use this sort of architecture to implement it. And this is deployed on-chain. So you can go, this is deployed on the Ring B chain, which is the testnet of Ethereum. And this QR code points to Etherscan, so you can view the whole smart contract, its code, and you can interact with it. So you can start playing for test ETH, putting rock, papers, and scissors. And I think it's really interesting to look at how you interact with smart contracts, how you call those functions from Etherscan, because it comes in handy when creating a crypto game later. Okay, so again, it's not what we call games usually, because games should be actually fun to play, and it should be, and play-to-earn games can be fun to play. You should be able to use the tools that you already know as developers, for example, Unity. And when it comes to game development, or any other engine, it doesn't matter, when it comes to game development, there are many topics to cover when designing a game, and many more when designing a game that's actually play to earn. And as I said, the gameplay is just the tip of the iceberg. You have to get somehow connect your game engine to the blockchain. You have to create some sort of tokenomics, how to create your custom tokens, NFTs, mint and sell those items, integrate with marketplaces, and so on. So when looking at the structure of a typical play-to-earn game like that, you would have your gameplay, of course, at the top, which is the thing you want to be focused on, but you need those foundations of course, your game engine, networking, security, and tokenomics and smart contracts, on top of which you build the actual gameplay. And that shows why some of the games that are available on the market, the gameplay can be viewed as an early prototype, because all of those other layers are quite challenging. Specifically, I would like to touch briefly again on security in my last 5 minutes. That's a screenshot from a casual game that we released a few years back. I consider myself to be really good at this game. It's an endless runner, but my high score was 900 points, 900-ish. And here the high score on the App Store is 54,000. Which means it's not possible to achieve this kind of score, and of course that player cheated. It's a single-player game, an endless runner, so cheating in that kind of game is quite easy when you want to cheat a leaderboard, for example, by connecting a debugger, by hacking into web server communication, and so on. And if you have monetary incentives or on cheating a game, for example, every time you achieve a score higher than 1,000, you get some monetary value, then players, of course, will be incentivized to do so. And in the blockchain space, it's really important to design for security, design your game architecture for security. You cannot have any doubts on whether, for example, who shot first here. You need to be 100% sure. And with that security in mind, it's not feasible to create games where players play themselves against one another, and then they directly interact with the smart contract calling some function like I scored 900 points, because players will find that, and then they will exploit it. And 100% blockchain games need better security than that. And that comes again to the blockchain oracle problem, which is the way of getting game results or any external data, like for example, who got hit by a bus or what was the weather today, how to get that data on a deterministic system like blockchain. And there are, of course, companies that do that, for example, Chainlink. It gets really complicated really quickly. and we won't get into that at the moment. However, you need to somehow, in an authoritative way, to be able to deliver game results to the blockchain when you want to create a crypto game. So, to sum up, the first steps that you would take when creating your first crypto game would be to, of course, design with security in mind from day one. You have to integrate your gameplay somehow with the blockchain in a secure way, preferably via blockchain Oracle services. I would recommend to start using what you know and to create the gameplay that is engaging, because, again, from everything I said, there is nothing that stops crypto game from being actually fun to play and engaging, and they should be, and those are the ones that are going to win. You should focus on building the world that people believe in and fall in love with, so that they can invest in your project early on and then stay engaged in it. And build your community, which is the single most important thing in the crypto space, that people know about your project, people are interested in what's happening in your project, and people are willing to interact with you in meaningful way. And of course, learning Solidity is always a plus. And again, as I promised, coming back to Elympics, you could also use our services and start building with us. And we consider ourselves a full package for Web3 games, which is first of all secure multiplayer architecture, which you can download to Unity and start creating your game, which is right off the bat integrated with the blockchain using off-the-shelf smart contracts that are available from us, with integrated blockchain oracles, which you can build and deploy for the browser in the cloud in a server authoritative manner. Create your games using what you know and love, so the game engines that you love, and not learning anything new, at least any new technologies, at least at the start, to prototype and deploy your game and start building your community. And the absolute easiest way to get started is to join our Web3 Jam, which will host late June. So if you want to take part in that, we'll walk you through the whole process. You can also scan this QR code if you want to learn more. However, we'll walk you through the whole process of creating a crypto game, and the best games that we'll be creating during that game jam will be deployed to the cloud with our services, and yeah, people will be able to play it, and the game will be published. And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much. If you would like to learn more about Elympics or ask me any questions, please feel free to hit me up on Telegram, for example.
Thank you very much, Michał. Right now we have a time for questions. So, who want to ask? We have 10 minutes for questions from you. Okay, I will go with microphone.
Hey. Thank you. Thank you. Great presentation, very comprehensive. So actually, I'm a big enthusiast of the technology and what it can bring. But I have two questions. So the first one, actually, I want to know your opinion. So the first question would be, why even use blockchain? Like, why not just do this as a regular technology where you can have a shop and you can allow people just to resell what they buy? And the second one is that recently Valve, I believe, said that they will not allow games on Steam that utilize Ethereum or like NFT, any NFT technology, which seems like a big obstacle to actually work on the games if you know that you will not be able to even list them on Steam. I'm talking about like bigger games maybe even. So what's your opinion? Why is that? And what is the direction it's going in the future from the point of view of like Valve and other stores? So yeah, thanks.
Okay, so starting with the second one, we actually, for us, we're building games that are for the browser and not published on Steam. However, I believe that the technology will only grow and will be utilized as a tool, because that's really what it is. Of course, I guess companies like, for example, like Apple, not allowing crypto games being published on their on their store, or for example, as you mentioned, Steam are incentivized to do so because it cuts their revenue. And to the in the end, I believe players will decide what they want to play. And to the second question, why use blockchain? First of all, because it's as marketplaces are already created and you don't have to build them yourself. It's the same reason why you would use in-app purchases for your in-game items instead of adding credit cards yourself to your system and then going through the pain of storing those transactions and of operating it. It's just easier to do so. Of course, Apple takes its cut, Google takes its cut, Steam takes its cut as well. But it's just easier to use, and of course you cannot do it any other way on the App Store, but that's the other thing. However, yeah, I believe that it's a technology that enables developers to create more freely and to utilize it as something that's already created and available.
Okay, thank you. Who next? Who want to ask about something? Okay, I see any hand in up or not. Okay, so thank you for that